Hello, you 6 billion awakening wonders, as Russell Brand is fond of saying. Today we are going to do the fuel sync procedure on this 1994 Jeep Grand Cherokee. This has to do with the distro, so I'm going to remove the air intake so that I can get access to it. And basically what we're going to do is set the engine on top dead center, and then we're going to move it to the fuel sync mark about 1.25 inches farther. And then we're going to wiggle the distro around until we get a positive 5 volts coming from it, and then try to put it on the line right between where the 5 volt sync is and where it's not. So let's get to it. So the first tool we're going to need today is a 5/8 spark plug socket. We're going to pull the number 1 spark plug, and then we're going to either use our finger as we turn the engine over, or we're going to use a compression gauge, which is what I'm going to be doing today, to make sure that we are on the compression stroke and not the exhaust stroke when we set the engine at top dead center. So you can see we are here on the driver's side of the engine bay, and we're just going to take the number 1 spark plug wire off, and then down in there is our number 1 spark plug. We're just going to go ahead and slip our tool in there. I'm working on a extension, and make sure you're going backwards. And we'll have to torque these when we put them back in, make sure we don't overdo it. I'm just going to get our first spark plug out. Okay, and so there's my first spark plug. I can take a look at it. It's not looking the cleanest ever, but it's not looking black either. So we'll just set that guy aside. And like I said, we're either going to stick our finger down in that hole while we turn the engine over, which can be a little difficult by yourself, or we're going to put a compression gauge on it. So let me go grab my compression gauge. And this is what my compression tester looks like. This particular one, it has 2 or 3 different attachments for different size spark plugs. This is my 5/8 spark plug adapter. So I'm actually going to screw this into the engine first and then attach the gauge afterwards. Alright, so I'm just going to slide this down in here until we feel it seat, and being careful not to cross thread anything. Try and keep it in the middle, out the space, make sure it's going in there straight while we rotate it. And you do want a good seal, but you don't want to get crazy with it. You don't want to damage the head in any way, but I'm going to give it some snugness to make sure that I get a good reading off of it. Okay, so now that that part's installed, I'm going to attach the compression gauge. But first I'm going to drop the gauge down into the engine bay so that I can take a look at it from underneath the vehicle, and then snap these 2 halves together. Alright, so this just pops in until it clicks. And for this next step, I'm going to need 1.25 inch socket because we're working on the 5.2 liter engine today. So this will allow me to turn the front of it over. Be sure to only move the engine in a clockwise motion, so that in this case is like this. So I'm going to make it so it goes the other way. There we go. And then I've also got a lit mirror. And what this is going to do is it's going to let me, it's telescoping too, it's going to let me look up at the timing mark, which is going to be above me while I'm underneath the car working on the ground, or in this case maybe I'll use the creeper. Okay, so here we are underneath the engine, And I've got my compression gauge hanging out where I can see it. And this is our harmonic balancer. And then on the front here is our crank bolt. And you can see on the harmonic balancer there are some marks. And then up here, where I'm not sure if you can see with my finger in the way, are the timing marks. So the timing marks face upward. So I'm going to take my lit mirror and set it so that I can see up above me at the timing mark. And you may have to wiggle it around a little bit till you can see it. You can see the 30-degree mark there and what says TDC. So that's our top dead center mark. Alright, so I'm going to just see if I can put that guy right there. Now I'm going to place my wrench on the crank bolt. And sometimes this is a two-handed job just to get that wrench in the right place. So I'm going to move the mirror out of my way for a second here. And depending on your socket depth, this may be easier or more difficult. Okay, but we're going to rotate the engine. We're moving the handle toward the passenger side of things now. And you can see the one mark there. I think my top dead center mark has been colored, but either way, might take a little patience. Feeling like an octopus here. Okay, like I said before, you need to basically only go clockwise with the engine, which means the handle is moving como así. Alright. Okay, so I've got myself a soapstone in this case. You need a soapstone or a grease pencil or just whatever will make a decent mark on your harmonic balancer. And I've got a flexible measuring tape. Probably other ways of doing this, but this is the way I'm going to do it. And just to get it out of my face, I'm going to put it over the top here. Alright, so we just need to mark 1 inch and 1/4 back. So let's see if I put this at 46. 1 inch and 1/4. That is really not much of a mark already there. I imagine it was there once, but at the moment it is worn away. Okay, so there's 1 inch and 1/4 right there. Very special thanks to the guys on Facebook for giving me this diagram. And supposedly there was a V8 mark there originally, but I'm not seeing it. Alright, so now we're going to keep going, and we're going to keep turning the engine over till we see compression and get close to that mark being at the top. And hopefully you guys won't have a light in your way because you won't be making a video. So that's a good thing. Make sure you can keep an eye on your compression gauge while you're turning. Okay, so I've got my gauge where I can see it, and I'm turning the engine over, and I've got my new mark at the V8 point, which actually I can now just vaguely make out. Okay, I'm starting to be able to see my back side mark. Hey Bendy, what's going on? Boy, oh boy. Maybe I will just zip tie this thing in place. Getting annoyed. Alright, I'm gonna go get a zip tie. Okay, so I went and got a zip tie so I can zip tie my mirror in place. And while I was at it, I took a pair of channel locks to the compression gauge in the spark plug hole, just to be sure that it's tight enough, because sometimes in the past I've had difficulty getting it tight enough. Alright, and if I'm really good at this, maybe I can get the mirror to stay put without having to hold it. That seems like it would really be better. So I can see both the harmonic balancer and the top dead center mark. Alright, I got a towel that I'm not afraid to get dirty. And I'm just gonna line this up on the mark and shove this towel in suspension here until it stays put. Cool. Alright, so now I can see my top dead center mark and my harmonic balancer on the top side. Keep the compression gauge where you can see it. Okay, so I retightened my compression gauge using some petroleum jelly and a pair of channel locks. And I'm going to see if I can turn the engine over again, find out whether we are on the compression stroke, and watching the gauge once you get close. First, you don't need to. So there's my top dead center mark and my V8 mark for the fuel sync. And I did just finally see my compression needle move. Alright, so I'm at top dead center right there. Very small amount of movement on my needle. And going back to the V8 mark right there. Still not the kind of compression I should see though. So I can hit my button to reset it, and I can feel I did lose some pressure there. So let's find out. We'll keep going. Now on the exhaust stroke you should have no movement whatsoever because both valves should be open. So if that was compression last time, then this next time I should still have 0 on the needle. Getting close. Okay, I got 0 on the needle. So I'm on the exhaust stroke. I'm just going to keep going. And maybe even though I've got that thing pretty tight, it's not as tight as it needs to be. But for our purposes today, it'll make sure that we are where we should be. Halfway. Okay, so I'm seeing movement. Definitely seeing movement now. Alright, so kind of did it twice just to be sure, because I wasn't certain about the amount of pressure. Normally I'm used to seeing a lot more in the gauge, but I might still not have it tight enough. A little afraid of over tightening it. Okay, so we're back at top dead center, and my needle is off of 0, and then we're going to move till we see top dead center and the timing mark together. That's right there. Groovy. Alright, so now that we put the engine at top dead center, we can put the spark plug back in, and we're going to go play with the distributor. Alright, so we want to put our spark plugs back in, and we can see the torque here says 26 to 30 foot-pounds. Alright, so 26 to 30 foot-pounds, that's a difference of 4. So I'm going to put it in at 28 foot-pounds, which is right in the middle there. Alright, so we looked up 28 foot-pounds is what we need to put it at, or 26 to 30. And so we're just going to turn this guy till we get 0 at 25 right there. And then 1, 2, 3, that's going to be 28 foot-pounds. Alright, first I need to remove my compression gauge. And next I'm going to put my spark plug back in. I might actually add a little never seize to this guy. He's looking a little dirty. So let me handle that first. Alright, so I cleaned up my spark plug some. Looking like it'll go back in, and I am just going to take a little bit of never seize. This is actually the product Anti-Seize by Versachem. I'm really going to try not to overdo it because it's easy to overdo it. We just want to add a very small dab on the topmost threads near the part that's going to seal right there. And just wiggle it around. Be careful not to cross thread it. Once it feels almost snug, take our torque wrench to it. Alright, 2 clicks. Alright, so there's our spark plug reinstalled. We don't want to lose the tool in there. Wiggle it a little bit to get it off. And if it gets stuck and you can't pull it off, you may need to go get some long pliers and grab it. Okay, so these guys, and reach down in there and get our tool back out. There we go. Cool. Seal up our container of anti-seize and put our spark plug wire back. Alright, our next step is going to be to loosen the distro hold down, which I'm going to get at from the other side. Okay, so this is kind of a pain in the butt, but the way I usually do it is by climbing up on top of the engine bay. Got my little step stool here, and if you reach down on the passenger side, it's a 13 millimeter, and there's a hold down. The hold down has a kind of yoke that goes around the distributor, and you just need to loosen the nut on the passenger side. It's below the distributor. It goes into the engine block. So first moves first. You gotta get down there and loosen the distributor hold down without driving yourself crazy. Okay. I'm using a small stubby ratcheting version of a 13 millimeter, which is much easier to work with back there. And once you get it loose, you should be able to grab the entire distributor and wiggle it back and forth by hand. We can see it wiggles back and forth by hand right now. Now next, see my wrench. We're going to need to find the cam pickup, which is in the distributor. It has a wire that comes out of it. And then follow that wire until we get to the wiring harness. So I can see on this side here the connector, and we just want to wiggle ourselves around until we have access to the connector. It may end up that it's trapped behind the fuel lines, or it may not. Alright, so on the 94, we're looking for the third wire, which in this case is a striped yellow wire, and it's this wire right here. So let me get you guys closer so you can see what's going on. Alright, so here's the pigtail and the cam sensor, and we need this striped yellow wire right here. I'm going to go double check that I have what I need. We're going to back probe that wire, attach a multimeter to it, then we're going to turn the engine on, and then we're going to wiggle the distro around until we find the right spot. Alright, so I've got my multimeter here. It's a relatively simple one. And I'm going to set it to DC voltage. And then just to check it really quick, I'm going to stick one side on the negative and one side on the positive and see that I'm in the right range. 12.4 sounds like where my battery would probably be sitting right now. And then we're going to attach the negative, the way we just had it, to the battery. And I actually need to reconnect the battery to the car in this case. And then we're going to go put the key in and turn the auxiliary on without starting the engine. Alright, so I gave the ignition switch a couple of clicks. And I've got a pin here, like this one. And what I'm going to do with the pin is I'm going to stick it into the electrical connector at that wire that we were talking about a minute ago. So here we are. Now entertain us. There's our wire. And we're going to back probe it like so. Hopefully it's going to make an electrical connection in there. Then I'm going to take my multimeter and connect it right here. Let's see if I can get you guys set up on a tripod so you can see what I'm actually doing. Okay, so here's our world of things happening. And just so it's one less thing to mess with, I'm going to take an alligator clip and I'm going to connect the multimeter to this pin with an alligator clip. Hopefully that's making a good electrical connection. Let's see what happens now. Okay, so the auxiliary is on and the distro is loose. And we're going to move our distro around. See if we can get a place with a 5-volt reading. Again, 9 volts. Okay, so there's 0. And there's 9. Let's figure out what's going on there. Maybe I'm on the wrong wire. Let me double check that. So here we are in the wiring diagram. Let's see if I can get this to focus correctly. Yeah, crankshaft position sensor, left side rear of the engine. And what we want is that number 3 circuit there that comes from the powertrain control module. That should be, the center one is ground. And then 1 is the 8-volt supply, which I think is the one we were on to begin with there. And then that third one is circuit K27. And you can see that when the tab on the connector is vertical or up, which you can see on the left there, that will be the one on our right. Because when we're looking at this connector diagram, we're looking into the connector like it's disconnected. So that should be number 3 right there. Alright, so then we're going to go back and see that we are checking the right circuit. Okay, so here's our connector, and now that we know where the tab is, we know that on this last circuit here, the farthest one with the tab up, we should be getting our positive 5 volts when the distributor is in the right place. Right now I'm seeing 0, so let's see if we can wiggle it around and get voltage. And you may want to adjust your probe a little bit just to make sure you're in a spot where you can get voltage. You can also just re-stab it. Getting some minor voltage here, but not what I should be getting. So let's keep trying to get into that wire. Alright, that's looking like I can see the voltage now. Okay, so there's 5 volts. And what we want is to wiggle the distro back and forth a little bit till we see that 5 volts come on and off. As it is right now, it's looking pretty continuous. Okay, So by moving it, I got the 5 volts to go away. By moving it back, I get it to come back. And what I want is to position the distro right at the place where it switches from one to the other. So I've got it at 0, and then I just slowly rotate it back until I see my 5 volts again. Alright. Now mind you, once you let go of the wire, it may not still read. Depends. So now I've got it in the right place. What I'm going to do is reach back with the wrench and tighten it, hopefully without rotating the distro whatsoever. Reach down in there, find the spot, and tighten it. Now if you had the distro out, this may not work to get it back where you need it to be. This is only going to work if you needed to adjust the sync and that the distro was relatively in the right spot. Just be delicate. You want to do anything but rotate the distro around while you're doing this. There is a fancy wrench designed to reach down in there. On a lot of cars it will work, but it won't work on the ZJ. The reason being, the engine bay is in your way. Okay, and once you've got it snug, that's it. You have done your fuel sync. Now, start your engine. See if it runs. If it doesn't for any reason, you might have moved the distro too far. Maybe I'll just pull this stuff off here and check it real quick. Okay, so that's our video for today on how to set the fuel sync on this 5.2 liter 1994 Jeep Grand Cherokee. Should be the same process for any Grand Cherokee in the first generation, so that's 1993 through 1998, and it should also be the same on the 5.9 liter. I'm Devin Haas from Haas Auto West. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe to our channel so we can send you more content in the future, and have a great day.